Hey guys, today I want to review 3 ball heads from FLM. In front of me I've got CB58, CB48, and the smallest of the 3 is CB32. And if you're wondering about that number within the model, it basically represents the size of the center ball. So in the case of this guy, it's 58 millimeters in diameter, then 48, then 32. And also that size of the center ball controls 3 key features: size, weight, and maximum load capacity. Obviously something like this is going to be much lighter and smaller compared to something like this, but it's also not going to be able to handle as much load in comparison. Another thing to keep in mind is that this is not a full review of the entire lineup of FLM ball heads. In fact, I only have 3, but FLM has a number of other ball heads that are in between these models. For example, between the 48 and the 32, there's also a 43 and a 38 model, whereas this is not the smallest one. There are also other models that are lighter and smaller than CB32. Now, what I want to do in this review is not only go through features and specifications of each one of these ball heads, but also compare them to other products on the market. For example, I personally use Really Right Stuff ball heads, and I own a number of different ball heads from the company for different needs. What I want to do is put those ball heads side by side with these and see how they compare in terms of pros and cons. So let's get started. First, I'll go over the biggest and the heaviest of the 3, which is the CB58. Now, this guy is a monster. It's a full-size ball head, and if you compare it to other ball heads on the market, you will find something like Really Right Stuff BH55 to be comparable in terms of size, weight, and price. Now, before I do a direct comparison with the BH55 that I have sitting here on my desk, I first want to talk about the key features and specifications of this ball head and what makes it so unique compared to its competition. First of all, it has a very impressive maximum load capacity of 55 kilograms, and 55 kilograms is a lot of weight to support. In comparison, the BH55 that I've been using over the years has a maximum load capacity of 23 kilograms, less than half of what this guy can provide. Now, you might be wondering, isn't 23 kilograms enough? That seems like a lot of weight to support, and I fully agree. In fact, over the years, I've never ran into a situation where I needed more. I've used all kinds of cameras and lenses, including some of the older manual focus Nikon super telephoto lenses like the 600mm f4, in combination with heavy DSLRs like Nikon D4, and I never had any issues with sagging or other problems in the field. So keep that in mind. 23 kilos is still plenty, but this guy can more than double that. So if you have specialized needs, maybe you have a very heavy equipment or some specialized setup that requires a ball head that can support all that weight, then this ball head would probably be one of the best on the market just because of that rating. Now, when I saw that, I first thought maybe it's just a marketing gimmick, and I wanted to give it a quick test. So what I did was I mounted a nodal slide on top of this ball head, and I mounted it on my heavy duty Gizzo tripod, and then I tried to pull with one hand and push with the other to see if I can just force this to move. With this knob tightened, I could not get it to move at all. In fact, all I ended up with was my tripod moving around. So then I realized that maybe I cannot have enough pressure to be able to force that. I ended up removing the ball head from my tripod, put it on the ground, and then try to apply force from the top. And I still could not get this thing to move. And the last test was to take it out and then have a rail. I was holding a rail with one of the hands, and I literally stood on it. And I tried to move it around. All I ended up was with just a side motion because there was no place to secure it on the ground. This thing held up really, really well. Now, to be fair, I repeated the same test with my BH55, and I ended up having the same result. That thing just would not move at all. So I'm not sure how you can properly test for the maximum load capacity rating, but based on the fact that this thing is made in Germany, excellent craftsmanship, and then also very good build quality overall, I can tell you that that rating is probably realistic. So for me personally, it's not that big of a deal. 23 kilos is still a lot, but if you have specialized needs, then like I said, this ball head is probably one of the best on the market when it comes to maximum load capacity. Now let's talk about these other features of the ball head. If you look at most normal ball heads out there, including some of the ones from Really Right Stuff, you might find maybe 2, maximum 3 knobs. Now in this guy, you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 knobs, and I'm including the tension knob on top of the main knob here. And you might be wondering, why do you need so many different knobs? Well, some of these provide very unique features that are normally not found on most other ball heads. For example, the tilt knob right here, it's a very interesting one. If I go ahead and loosen this up a little bit, and if I tighten the tilt knob, you can see that the ball head will move in one direction, but it will not move on the other. Now, one thing to keep in mind about this tilt knob, it's kind of useful to have, but it's not a replica of the ability to do this on something like the unique ball, which I'll show you later on in a different video. But the interesting thing here, if I tighten this really hard, I can still force it to move to the side, which is something, it could be a disadvantage, especially if you have a setup where your camera maybe is very heavy and you're relying on the tilt feature. By default, it will work fairly well, but let's go ahead and loosen it up. Like I said, it works really well, but I can still force it to the side. As you can see, I was able to move it to the side. So that's kind of a disadvantage. I could not get this thing to work where I can tighten it to the level where it's not going to move to the side, and so that it only goes in one direction. So it has its advantages, but definitely has its disadvantages as well. Still nice feature to have. Now let's go over these other 2 knobs. You've got the 15-degree stop knob in addition to the pan, and you kind of work these together. And the nice thing about this, if I loosen the panning knob, which is something that you will find either as a knob or a switch on most other ball heads, as you can see, the base rotates. This is for panning, for doing like panoramas and stuff like that, which is very nice to have. But one key difference between this ball head and other ball heads like my BH55, for example, is the fact that I can tighten the 15-degree knob and then this becomes geared. Now this is a very nice addition, and I wish all ball heads had this capability because it's just something that I really miss on my BH55. When you have a geared panning base here, you can do panoramas. And with the panoramas, you don't have to look at your framing constantly. In fact, you can just rely on the gear itself to make the panorama. So kind of a nice feature to have. And all you have to do is just, go counterclockwise, and then it just becomes a regular panning base, and then you rotate it clockwise and then it becomes geared. So that's a cool feature. Now in terms of the panning knob itself, if you secure it really hard, as you can see, you have to move it quite a bit. This base will not move at all, which is very nice. And I've had so many different situations with other ball heads where you rotate the panning knob, or there's a switch that you kind of flip down and you put it really, really hard, and this thing still rotates, which can be very annoying when you have a tripod and the ball head is stuck on a tripod. In those situations, it can be very difficult to remove the ball head. But in this case, I found the panning knob to work really well, and it stays really secure here. Now let's talk about the main knob along with the tension knob. This is something that as a BH55 user, it took me some time to get used to. After using it for about a month or so, I kind of got used to it, but I still found it somewhat annoying. Let me explain you why. So if you loosen it fully, you can see that it moves really well and very smoothly, and I like that compared to some other ball heads that can be jittery. It's really nice, but there is one thing that I personally couldn't get used to for a long time, which is if I have my camera set up, usually with my BH55, all I have to do is just move once and it stays secure and it just locks it in place. With this guy, watch. If I rotate, in order to be able to secure it, look at how many times I have to rotate it. And this can be something that in the field, if you don't realize, if you're used to just moving it once, then you put your camera and you let it go, and then it might just fall off. So this is something that for me, I still have a hard time getting used to, and keep that in mind. And let me pull the BH55 out now, because this would be a good time to compare it. So with the BH55, this is the setup setup that I use, you can see that it's a pretty beat up tripod because I use it all the time. And I'll talk about the plates in a second, but in terms of the knobs, you can see that the BH55 has one main knob, then it has a tension knob, and then the panning knob. So just 3 of them there compared to the 5 over there. So with this guy, if I just loosen it up a little bit, and I can then freely move this around. And I have my tension set up in a way where I think it's around 14 or 15 or so that it doesn't just fall off very quickly. Because if you let this go, it might be in a situation where it's just gonna fall very quickly. One of the biggest annoyances with any ball head, in fact. But what I like about it is, look, this is loose, and this is just like maybe a 15, 20 degree turn, but look at this. You know, it's just let it loose, and then all I have to do is just once, and this is really, really secure. Well, in this case, let me tighten that up. That's my panoramic base here. But anyway, look at how tight it becomes with just a quick turn. Whereas with this guy, if this is loose right now and I rotate it several times already, it still stays loose. So that's one of my personal annoyances with the FLM, and in fact all of their ball heads have the same behavior. At the same time, once you tighten it though, it becomes so secure. This thing will not move. So if you just get used to that motion, then it's not that big of a deal, and you can get used to it over time. Now let's talk about a few other things and comparison between these two guys. Well, first of all, let's look at the different plates. So this is the plate or the release clamp that was provided by FLM, and this is the default one that they will ship when you buy it together with a clamp. And what I like about it, there are certain things that I definitely like about it and certain things that I don't. For example, look at the size of the Arca Swiss plates. Now here, or the actual ridges that hold Arca Swiss plates, you can see this one is very deep and very long, and even on the quick release versions of it, the Really Right Stuff plates are fairly long. They will hold, there's more real estate where it actually holds the plate. Whereas with this guy, it's much shorter. Not too big of a deal, but something that you have to keep in mind. Also, what I like about this guy compared to this, obviously this is a much smaller version, but you can see there's a level over here on the top as well as on the knob itself. And that's a very cool feature to have, because whether you're shooting vertically or horizontally, you can get this thing to level and just watch it from the top. Now with the Really Right Stuff ball head that I have here, I actually swapped this out. I bought this separately, and that's kind of the nice thing about any of these ball heads is that you can swap the top level plate and have something different that works for you. For me, the reason why I like this setup is because this is actually a panoramic base. So I can loosen this up, and this then becomes my rotation. So which is kind of nice to have, because then I don't have to balance my ball head by itself. I can just rotate this enough, and then even if it's not out, even if it's completely out of balance, I can still put this into a level and then do my panorama. So these things are obviously different accessories that you can get, but let's talk about the main features and things that separate these ball heads. I'm gonna go ahead and turn them around so you can see from the back. So obviously the main knobs are here, and then there's a tension knob, but there is a difference in the profile, which is how high these ball heads are. As you can see, the BH55 is a little bit shorter compared to the FLM CB58. So that might be an issue if you're traveling and if you want a more compact setup, especially if you don't have a big head like me here, or the big panning base like me here. If you get something like this, a very small one and compact one, then it's going to be even smaller. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, in terms of weight, the BH55 is actually heavier compared to the FLM CB58. This measures 783 grams, while the BH55 is 890 grams. So there's definitely difference in weight. Although this is kind of a shorter profile, it's also a little bit wider maybe, I don't know, it's hard to say here, but all of this metal is definitely something that accounts for its weight. So BH55 overall is heavier. So if you were to you compare them side by side and look which one is going to be better, in this case, the BH55 loses in a number of ways. First of all, like I said, it is heavier. Second, it doesn't have all these nice features that this ball head has, like being able to do the tilting in one direction or being able to have a geared panning base. And lastly, if you're worried about the maximum load capacity, obviously this is only going to be able to handle, in comparison, 23 kilograms, and this one is able to handle 55 kilograms. So feature-wise, it's much better to go with the FLM just based on the features. But in practical terms, when I use all kinds of ball heads in the field, and one thing about the BH55, this thing is bulletproof. I mean, I've taken it everywhere and I've been using it for many years now, never had any issues, very easy to clean, and the maintenance and support with the really great stuff is always stellar. So whereas with these guys, FLM is, I believe they're not even based in the United States, because the guys that sent me these tripod heads, they sent me the units out of Canada. So if you need support, you're gonna have to send it most likely from the United States to Canada for support. Still, they seem to be very responsive, and looks like you would be able to get support with FLM in case something goes wrong. So just a few things to keep in mind. Like I said, if I were to reassess my needs today, and if I were shopping for a new ball head, I would probably go for an FLM purely based on the specifications, and I really love that panning, the gear panning that this guy provides. So let's go ahead and put this guy away for now, and let's talk about these two other ball heads. Next is CB48, and as you can see, it's smaller and it's obviously going to be lighter compared to the CB58 model. Now, this guy is rated at 35 kilograms, still more than what BH55 is rated at, and it's lighter significantly, 592 grams compared to 783 grams. So if you are looking for something that is going to be smaller and lighter, this would be a very good candidate, because in terms of features, it has very similar features as its bigger brother. First of all, it has the very same knob design. So this is the main and then tension knob. Then it has a tilt knob, again, same thing that it does with the tilting, and the panning and the 15 stop panning knob here. So as you can see, if I go ahead and loosen it up, does exactly the same thing, which is very nice. So compared to its bigger brother, has very similar features, slightly different weight capacity, and overall does pretty much the same thing. And I've used this one as well in the field, and I would say that in practicality, it would probably be something that I would personally pick over the full-size ball head, because you know it provides plenty of capacity in terms of the weight handling, and it has all the features of the full-size ball head minus the weight. So obviously this would be a great choice for everyday photography needs. Whereas this last guy is a perfect ball head for travel needs. And this one is going to be a little bit different though. As you can see, it is significantly smaller and lighter compared to these other two ones. And also, it doesn't have all the features. So you do lose some of the functionality and features, but overall, in terms of its capabilities, it's still a very capable ball head. As you can see, again, same thing with the knobs, and this thing works really well. The tension knobs also works really well, and I found it to be very practical in the field. And then it doesn't have the geared panning base, but still it rotates pretty smoothly and it locks down in place really well. For its size and weight, it's a good setup to take with you when you're traveling. At 311 grams and a maximum load capacity of 20 kilograms, this is actually a fairly powerful ball head, especially considering its size, weight, and price. Now, if I didn't care for all the tilting and the geared panning features that I showed you on these other ball heads, something like this would probably work out really well for everyday needs as well. And in fact, when I was traveling, I was using this guy with fairly heavy camera setups, and it performed admirably well. Now, if you were to compare this to the really right stuff equivalent, it would be something like the BH30 that I've got here. And this is something that I've been using for many years now. It's part of my travel kit. Now, if you put these side by side, you can see that again, the really right stuff has a smaller profile compared to the FLM unit, But in terms of weight, they're about the same. This is about 318 grams compared to 311 grams. However, there are certain things that are missing on the Really Right Stuff compared to the FLM, and there are certain annoyances. My first gripe about this is that the knob here sometimes will touch the plate. As you can see, if the plate is lower, the knob gets in the way, and this can be very annoying. Another problem with this is that it doesn't have a tension knob compared to this guy. Now with this guy, you will never run into an issue with the plate touching the knob because the knob is obviously round and the plate never reaches that far. Even if I angle it this way, there's no way, shooting in this case vertically, it would never get in the way to touch this guy. Whereas that's my constant struggle with the Really Right Stuff BH30. And the tension knob is also nice to have because you can then control that and have more tension on the ball head itself. Whereas here, if I let it go, then it just becomes very loose. So something to keep in mind as I assess my travel needs, if I were to look at ball heads today, I would definitely pick the CB32 of FLM compared to the BH30 today. So in terms of just comparison, as you can see, these FLM ball heads, they are very powerful. They handle a lot of weight. They do all kinds of different things, all these different tilt and geared panning features that other ball heads don't have, or most of them don't have. And then in terms of value, you know, just looking at the selection, yes, they might be priced right around the same, maybe slightly cheaper or more expensive depending on the ball head that you're looking at. But in terms of pure features, Really Right Stuff in this case is losing pretty much in every case. So keep that in mind as you look for different ball heads. This FLM is surprisingly a very good brand, and I'm a big fan now after using these for a couple of months now. I've used these two guys for a couple of months and about a month with a bigger guy, and I'm really surprised by how well these ball heads have been performing. I hope you enjoyed this review. In my next video, I'll put together a comparison of different ball heads and other tripod heads so that you can see their differences.